Hello. You might remember a poem, fairly famous poem by Joyce Kilmer, which began with the line, I think, that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree. It's a poem in praise of trees, and it invites us to consider their beauty. It is full of images, one of the most memorable ones being the idea of a tree lifting up her branches in an act of praise. Sudden, unexpected praise and joy. Only God, said Joyce Kilmer, can make a tree. And trees are there in the Bible at various points. They don't form a central part of scriptural text. They are in some of the prophetic books. The tree in the garden begins it off in Genesis. And right at the end of the Bible too, in the book of Revelation, there's the tree of life, the leaves of which are for the healing of the nations. The trees of the fields will clap their hands in joy at the coming of God's kingdom. And then there's this very purple passage in the book of Daniel. The tree grew great and strong. Its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the ends of the whole earth. Its foliage was beautiful, its fruit abundant, and it provided food for all. The animals of the field found shade under it. The birds of the air nested in its branches, and from it all living beings were fed. In one of his earliest poems, the poet R.S. Thomas describes a really strange and very wonderful encounter with God that seems to come from nowhere as he went into a very remote country church to pray. It was perhaps a little church in Wales, a bit like this one. Cold and in the depths of winter. This church is Capel Finn, and if you're a lover of driving for a long distance up a single track road with lots of blind corners, it's a good one to visit. Well, it's a good one to visit anyway. And here it is in close-up. It's very small. And inside, the windows give way to a view of trees and of mountains. Thomas describes an encounter in prayer, alone, in church. Perhaps we can remember, if the church we go to isn't open for private prayer at the moment, that feeling of entering into the quiet and the stillness of a church and seeking God, being on our own like this, listening for God, praying to God. Thomas speaks of a profound sense of absence. God doesn't seem to be there. The prayers are just hitting the roof, the high ceiling of the church. He's locked in and feels out of contact in this sense of absence. And then something wonderful happens. Time passes. And in the shades of evening, perhaps he catches sight of a tree in the garden, perhaps a bit like this one in the rays of the setting sun. And suddenly he's transformed into a sense of presence. Suddenly, in the dryness of prayer, God has made himself known. He has caught a glimpse of God somehow in a strange and mysterious way that we may find sometimes when, as for all of us, prayer is hard and grinding and God seems a long way away. Suddenly, we can have this glimpse. Perhaps it was an effect of the light in the glass, like this, that did it. But he sensed the presence and the passion of Christ filled the air. It's a vision in that winter church, in that winter landscape, the berries on the trees, somehow taking him through to the place of Christ's death, and through that to the eternal light that lies beyond. Perhaps echoing one of the very first poems ever written in Christian Britain, The Dream of the Rood, which is a poem that meditates on the idea of the cross, too, like all creation, being called to worship Christ and resurrected with him. So perhaps we too, in our prayers, can seek the silence and be aware of the absence, the loss, the wintriness of our hearts sometimes, and the farness of God. But keep an eye open for that sudden glimpse that God may provide of his nearness, his presence, his light, his glory, as Thomas found in this poem. To one kneeling down, no word came, only the wind's song, saddening the lips of the grave saints, rigid in glass, or the dry whisper of unseen wings, bats, not angels, in the high roof. Was he balked by silence? He kneeled long, and saw love in a dark crown of thorns blazing, and a winter tree golden with the fruit of a man's body.